At least not yet. I might say, Jeff, at least hopefully never, but maybe I'm betraying my own sense of insecurity there. And also congrats on the progress and affirmation. That's important. Yeah. But I think it also gets us to another set of points, Jeff, which is that, Cal made these, and I want to highlight and get your take on. You mentioned or alluded to it a little bit before in your answer around the Arizona Republic experience. But I think when he was talking, we both glommed on to his point around the updated Turing test. And for those who don't know, the original Turing test, it was proposed in 1950 by Alan Turing. And he basically said, look, if we have a computer on, one side of a cloak and you're on the other side, and you don't know if it's a person or a computer, and you're having this conversation, the question is, are you unable to distinguish whether it is in fact a computer or a person? And if so, if the computer is able to convince you that it in fact is a person, it has passed the Turing test. Yep. And so the question around AI has often been just that. Can you win the Turing test in essence? And Cal, I thought, made an interesting point, which he said the updated Turing test shouldn't just be like, can you fake a human being, but can you empty my inbox for me? And I know you're dying for that support, but the answer, right, is clearly no for most people at the moment, unless your inbox is just spam, I suppose. We don't have that true functional assistant yet, despite all the predictions, the hype, the talk around Copilot at your wing and all the rest. But for me, Jeff, I guess my thinking has been that for AI to be truly transformational, it's really going to require new business models wrapped around it. And the analogy that's been in my head has been when electricity transformed factories and manufacturing, it really only made that transformation once new factory models emerged that realized you didn't have to have the factory centered around the steam power. Like not everyone had to be moving at the exact same rate as governed by the steam power that was centrally located. You could now decentralize power, in effect, to each individual workstation through electricity. And so it was really the change in model, right? Like literally redesign or building from scratch in most cases, that made electricity so valuable in the manufacturing sector. And as a result of that, it actually took a long time for electricity to remake the manufacturing sector. And I guess that had been my sense here as well. And it still may be, but I think what Cal is also saying is, hey, the form factor itself is a major limitation right now. It's still primitive. We're not in the future going to be focusing on how to do language prompting in exactly the right way, asking it to pretend that it's Steve Jobs to give an innovative idea or something like that. It's going to get more natural. It's going to perhaps be able to understand intent behind words and tone and things of that nature. And where it really needs to get to, in Cal's view, is in the same way email at some point was just so obvious we knew how to use it, although there's a bit of a memory hole, I suspect, there too. We need to get to the same point in large language models. But I'd love to hear your take on all that, because, the implication is that higher ed sort of should wait, and then hurry up. And you sort of laughed when he made the jump to the part of, hey, higher ed, don't teach prompt engineering yet. Don't start with hypothetical use cases yet. Don't imagine that it will wipe out writing. Wait till we see the commercial use cases, and then let's move fast. And that's where I think you laughed. And I would just love to get your thoughts on this. What was like the track in your head as he was describing that?
Well, I laugh for two reasons. Sometimes we see these press releases, we're going to offer like prompt engineering now as a major, right? And I also laugh because he said, okay, patience and then like speed up, right? And higher ed is not good at either one, especially the speed up part of it, right? And I think that's a critical point where he was advocating for patience because, Michael, there's this hot mess of an old style message board in DC called DC Urban Moms and Dads. Mostly it focuses on moms. It's essentially Reddit, but not as good, I will be honest. But I admit I get sucked into reading some of the threads because I'm a DC urban dad, right? And there was one the other day in the college and university thread, and I'm often in there seeing what people are talking about in terms of colleges and universities. And it had this title, quote, AI and what the heck to major in, if at all, end quote, right? It was just this conversation among parents about what should their kids do, because of AI. And it was basically parents freaking out about their kids' majors and how AI will make them all irrelevant. And then someone asked if there was an AI major anywhere that their kids can major in. And of course there is. According to my research, Carnegie Mellon had one way back in 2018. You could get a BS in artificial intelligence. Now, most of these, of course, now are in computer science, but I think the parents were really talking about AI in every other discipline, right? Should there be such a degree? And so there's another history lesson here that I think is important for our listeners. And, we all may recall the Great Recession of 2008. And coming out of that, every survey that we saw said that teenagers are going to college to get a job, right? Hasn't changed, obviously, since then. Even more so, we know from our previous episodes in the last couple of seasons. Is all about the job. And so what we saw in 2011, 2012, you started seeing these colleges creating all these practical programs. And 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, you would expect most of those practical programs should be cycling through graduates. You start seeing a lot of graduates. If these programs are so practical that they get students a job, you would think students would enroll in them and graduate from them. Well, what really happened? You would actually be kind of hard-pressed to find graduates of many of these programs, according to this analysis that Burning Glass did at the time. Now, Burning Glass, of course, being Lightcast. And what it found in that report, and we'll link to that report in our show notes, is that almost half of all degree programs that first graduated students in 2012 or 2013 conferred fewer than 5 degrees in 2018. So five years later, 5 degrees. 30% of these programs graduated no students, 0 students, after 5 or 6 years after their first graduating classes. And about 2/3 of all programs included in the analysis produced 10 or fewer graduates in 2018. It's funny because Burning Glass called that report bad bets. And I think that's the case, that higher ed doesn't have a great track record of jumping ahead of the market. So this may be a case where higher ed moving more slowly might be a good thing.
It's so interesting, Jeff, and I'm pretty sure we covered that report on a past episode of Future You. But I will say, and I've said it before, I think this is a big argument for experiential learning. Like, the actual use cases are going to move fast. It's going to be really hard to codify it in curriculum. And so the only way I think, faculty, institutions will be able to keep up is to let the students actually experience it as, a project in the course of the academic work. And that's all a plus, I think, for apprenticeships, work-based learning, and the like, I think, Jeff. Tightly coupling work with the learning, in other words, because they are unpredictably interdependent. Even as I think that, Cal is right that the techno-optimists like Ethan Mollick, they have a lot of wind behind their backs at the moment, but the pattern is probably going to repeat itself. You referenced that story where he said in the next 10 years, we're not going to see the ad market change. That actually was pretty reasonable in some ways. And I think it's consistent. Our expectations are almost always disappointed in the short run, but they're actually often overly conservative in the longer run. I suspect the same pattern repeats with AI. One other thing, though, on this, Jeff, that also made Cal's statement interesting to me is here's a Georgetown University professor, and he is implicitly saying, hey, faculty of higher ed, being relevant to the job market is important. How companies are actually using technology is important as you teach. And we know that is not a popular sentiment with many faculty, Jeff, on campuses.
Yeah, Michael, let me just repeat what he told us. And I'm paraphrasing here, right? That instruction has to be grounded in the truth of the actual commercial world. But then higher education has to be willing to move rather quickly. And now to quote him, right, he said the university shouldn't get out ahead and say, we could imagine it would be useful in the future in this type of job to be good at ChatGPT. So we're going to teach you how to do it. It needs to actually see how this tool is being used in this job. Okay, now once we know that, we can move fast and actually teach about it, right? So look at the job market and see what's happening. And this brings me back to something, Michael, that we're going to be talking about a lot more in the second episode on AI next week. And that is whether the true impact of AI right now on universities will be on the classroom side or on the administrative and services side. Because I think the academic side obviously is getting all the oxygen now. If you look at any article about AI and higher ed, it's all about what's happening on the teaching and learning side. And it's interesting, Michael, because I've done some trustee and senior leadership retreats in August, this past August. And one of the things we did was the spectrum exercise where people get up from their chairs and they move around the room. Our friend and one of the early producers of Future You, Lauren Dibble, gave me this idea. And you ask these groups lots of questions about the future. And then you say, okay, if you think this is going to happen, move to this side of the room. If you think this is going to happen, move to that side of the room. And I will tell you that most of the questions about the future, most people were pretty divided. But when I asked them about AI and where the impact of AI is going to be, is it going to be on the administrative side or is it going to be on the teaching and learning side? Almost everybody in the room, almost everybody, in fact, in some cases, everybody went to the administrative services side, right? And these are people running universities, running colleges and universities, whether they're trustees or administrators. And, so I found it interesting that when we asked Cal about this and he put on his faculty member hat at Georgetown, that he really hasn't seen its impact on the administrative side, at least not yet. And I like how he framed the idea that whatever comes out on either side of this equation in higher ed, whether it's on the teaching and learning side or whether it's on the administrative service side, it has to be intuitive, right? Just like email and Google were, right? Email, as he said, changed the entire rhythm of how we worked because anybody could use it, right? To, from, subject line, right. Very simple. And so, next week, Michael, we're going to dig a lot deeper into that and how AI is changing higher ed with a focus on not only the classroom and research, but also marketing, enrollment, and student success. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper on that administrative and services side. So until then, be sure to follow us at Future You Podcast on X and LinkedIn and on the web at futureyoupodcast.com, where you can sign up for our newsletters. Also follow us now on the YouTube channel, because you could actually see us now, not only hear us.
I'm not sure if that's a perk, Jeff.
I'm not sure either, but my wife, once again, I'm quoting her twice on this podcast. She's not quite sure why people watch podcasts, but I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone who watches podcasts because sometimes I do too. So you can watch us on YouTube, Future You Podcast. You can follow me, Jay Selingo, and Michael at Michael B. Horn on different social media channels, including LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. And we'll see you next time on Future You.